Good morning. The Committee of the Whole is called to order. Unfortunately, we don't have a quorum. I'd like to recognize my colleagues that are here this morning, and we have Speaker Teresa Lies, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Wonder Barnes, Senator Chris Barnett, Senator Roy Kinata, and Senator Jesse Luan. Once we reach a quorum, we will continue on. At this point, we're back in recess. Committee of the Whole is called back to order. We do have a quorum, and we will now proceed to Senator Guåhan. Do you have any questions for the panel, sir?
Yes, I do.
You have
Good
10
morning.
minutes.
I'm sorry? 10 minutes? Okay, I'm going to start now because it's not on yet. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and happy Friday to everybody. Good morning, panel. Let me ask this question here. In regards to the, whereabouts is the real estate taxes shown in the budget here?
Real estate taxes go into the Guam Educational Facilities Fund.
Okay, so that's where it's shown?
Yes.
Okay, and what does that come to? The real estate taxes collected?
About 30.
Computer.
Our proposal is 35,865,000.
I'm sorry?
Our proposal is 35,864,705.
Okay, okay, thank you. I think this was answered yesterday as well. The projected revenues, of course, as originally introduced versus the substitute version before us now. The comparison of projections, of course, shown in January versus now is about an increase of over 8.25%. Can you reiterate again the reason of the increase between the original proposal versus the substitute version? The revenue?
Are you referring to the difference in the original bill?
Yes,
versus the
yes,
amended
yes,
bill?
yes.
You're talking about the bill that will be presented, not
Yes.
not the governor's. Okay.
Well, yeah, from what the governor had proposed versus OFB, yeah.
If you look at the difference of the what the EBR submitted versus what we submitted in the amended bill, I believe the difference is $46 million.
Okay.
Okay. Where's the breakdown for that? And that 46 million, Senator, comprised of the following: 1.7 million for DPR operations. DPW operations, I'm sorry. GPD operations at 3.2 million.
Yeah, okay.
GPD recruit cycle is at 1.4 million. GFD operations is at 3.7 million. GFD recruit cycle is at 1.6 million. DOC operations is at 2.1 million. DOC recruit cycle is at 1.6 million. DYA summer youth program is 2 million. Public health insurance premium for foster children is at 1.7 million. Public health insurance, Public Health Bureau of Social Services Administration is 7.6 million. DOE operations is 10 million. Charter school operations is 4.4 million. And UOG operations is 2.4 million.
With the charter school appropriations, that include the current two charter schools that have just recently come online?
Yes, it does, Senator.
Okay. Oh, okay. So, if I'm not mistaken, because this is for the next fiscal year, but we have a. Does this cover also the remainder this past couple months, or the remainder of 2 months for the charter schools, Mr. Chair?
Okay, on the August to September for the two new schools?
Yes, for the two new
That
schools.
was covered on the bill that we passed, that the governor signed.
Okay,
Now,
okay.
on the budget bill, it includes
includes
them, but it didn't include the increase in the per student rate.
It did not include?
It didn't
did not
include that for
okay.
everybody, and that one we'll be introducing later.
Okay, okay. I just want to make sure with that, because we don't want to fall behind on that as well. But
Well, let me stand corrected. I'll have Steve comment on that part.
Okay.
Yes, Senator. Going back to your comment, whether or not it included the bill, what was just passed recently in the bill, it did not include that simply because this is going forward from October 1st.
Sure.
I understand that what was covered in the bill was utilizing FY24 excess revenues.
Yeah, got it. Okay. But as the chairman, Mr. Chairman, you were saying that it did not include the rise or for per student rate, right? So you're going to be introducing a bill after the budget bill for that, Mr. Chairman?
If I may answer that, Senator, yes, it did not include it simply because it's not passed yet.
Okay.
So we don't normally include something in the budget.
That's not passed yet. Yeah, absolutely. But you're going to be introducing that shortly after, right?
It'll be part of the miscellaneous.
Okay. Okay. So it'll be
in this
part
bill.
of part of this bill.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. I thought it'd be after the budget, but it'd be miscellaneous provisions in this bill. Okay, thank you very much for that. I think this question was answered yesterday, basically in the specific factors of the income tax projection revenue that it was adjusted almost 30 million from the governor's submission to OFB's projections. What was the cause for the 30 million increase? I think you guys answered it yesterday, but can you reiterate again the difference between the governor's proposal versus OFB's proposal? I think in excess of 30 million or something like that?
Yes, Senator. Again, just bear in mind that when the executive budget was prepared, it was prepared back as early as November, December, and was transmitted to the legislature in January 31st. During the course of January 31st to kind of when the budget was, we finally looked at it, there were several things that were not funded that needed to be funded in FY25. Mm-hmm. So what we did, again, like we'd always do, is we go back to the executive budget requests, and we try to trim what we can trim out of the requests and take out repeated appropriations, to the sort, to come down with a realistic number moving forward. But even at that, we found that the 48 million that the governor was requesting was insufficient to cover these requirements. So we had to literally go back and kind of like, say, hey, we need to pump up, basically, the revenues in order to cover these, anticipated expenditures going into FY25. That's why we did it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And likewise, actually, and before that too, that was before even taxes were being paid, right? I mean, of course, the April 11th or April 15th is that, so before that, taxes were already being paid. But so you had a better projection after people started paying taxes that this will increase by that amount?
Fortunately, Senator, ever since then, the government has actually been experiencing, greater collections and revenues.
Okay. So, and what you said yesterday, basically, because, it's hard to understand that quite a few people are leaving, and in the private sector, wages have been really stagnant and all that, and so, but we have an increase in income taxes, and so is that maybe attributed to maybe the 22% increase of Guam? So would you say that most of that income tax increase generated by revenue tax came from Guam employees based on the 22% increase?
I would say, Senator, it may contribute partially, but I think the biggest increase you will see is actually in the withholding.
Withholding.
Yeah. So as the saying goes, the more you make, the more they hold. So of course, with all the increases in the salaries, across the board for government employees, I'm certain, at least to some degree, that is contributing to the increase in both of those categories.
Okay. I heard yesterday Mr. Carlson basically mentioned because the BPT has actually increased as well, and whether or not there was any talk. I mean, I know I got a bill to lower the BPT, but have you heard of any talk about rolling back the BPT to 4% as well?
Can I refer that to Mr. Ed Burns?
Senator, if I could, good morning, if I could pick up some part of what you said. Yes, you know, a large component of government revenues come from business privilege tax. As we had, I think it came out of the SES discussion, there's a large number of taxpayers who don't pay the full 5% because they come under various exemptions. So there are probably only a very few large taxpayers who exceed the exemptions and pay the full 5%. Because you're seeing this increase, I think it's reasonable to assume that much of that increase comes from these large taxpayers, the large contractors that are doing work both inside the gate and outside the gate on the island, and the people that are supplying materials for those construction activities.
Okay. Now, okay. So let me ask this question, because I've got a bill as well that if that was the case, that maybe we'll roll back taxes on food and medicine and maybe even prescription drugs. What would that? How do you foresee that if that was rolled back? Because there's a bill if there ever came out of committee, and we did that. What do you foresee in that? If we roll back again the prescription drugs or food and medicine?
Well, currently, Senator, we don't have an analysis of the taxes that come from those categories because they're not a current category. So it would be very hard, as we sit here, to predict what that might be. And we would also have to look at the bond indentures, because the bond indentures basically say that we are required to charge the basic 3% on goods and services. I don't have the indentures in front of me, so we would have to see whether there was any wording of that indentures that would be infracted by that bill.
Okay. You know, on the governor's message for last year's budget, actually was lapsed into law, she mentioned here, Chapter 12, Section 50, fiscally unsound depletion of the rainy day fund. I'll just read the titles there, basically. Also, Chapter 12, Section 46, improper use of FY24 executive branch appropriations to pay prior administration's merit bonus obligations, which is whichever administration is in is on board is liable for that as well. And then continued improper appropriation of FY22 audited excess general fund revenues and FY23 excess fund revenues. That being said, that being said, because this is what she gave to us based on budget, has the legislature's FY22 expenditure bills from excess revenues caused problems as described by the governor's transmittal of this current year's budget?
Well, with respect to the appropriations for fiscal 22, the governor released a press release that showed what had been appropriated from it, and what I think there's general confusion between excess revenues and audited surplus. The surplus, the amount of the surplus wasn't available to uphold those particular appropriations, and that's what she was saying in her press release. So when the fiscal 23 financials come out, what that will effectively do is maybe not increase, but that tranche will cause a deficit, if you like, in the general fund surplus, if any, for fiscal 23. So it'll kind of look back to fiscal 22 from fiscal 23, but it's done now, so there's no changing of it. It'll just potentially increase a fiscal 23 deficit, or more likely decrease a fiscal 23 surplus.
Yeah. Okay, so let me ask this, because we see, of course, look at where we're at. Schools opened yesterday. They were supposed to open last week. We only have basically half of the schools open this week. Next week, hopefully all of them will be open. I'm hoping all of them will be open. That being said, why has not the administration proposed the use of basically unexpected excess revenues, which are beyond the budget uses for best projections, such as, of course, again, school maintenance and capital improvements for Simon Sanchez High School, GMH repairs and all that? I mean, knowing going in with the original proposal versus the OFB's proposal, why is that not? Why, knowing that we have the problem and it's getting even worse, that these things are not proposed?
My best understanding of the issues at DOE, and I don't know that anybody yet has a full and complete understanding, and indeed the governor's task force went out to all the schools that needed to be corrected as a result of inspections, or feared to be needed to be corrected because of inspections. So, and that report, I think, is coming in this afternoon. Mm-hmm. My best understanding is the issue is not a matter of funds. DOE keep on telling us, or certainly me, that they have sufficient funding. DOA has offered to help them with procurement activities, but DOE advised us that they're okay. Their emergency procurement declaration is sufficient for them to do what they mm-hmm. want. So the issue seems to be more an issue of recognizing what needs to be done and the manpower that needs to actually make these corrections. Why that wasn't done before, I really can't answer, but that task report
sure.
is coming out this afternoon.
You know, what's baffling is Okadu High School comes with a maintenance contract. They're not open, which basically puts two schools out of commission. With a maintenance contract, I mean, isn't there any clause in the maintenance contract that we hold the maintenance contractors responsible for this? I mean, is there any repercussions, any monetary repercussions that can be an outcome for this? I mean, because the students are paying, but the responsible party for not getting the permitting it up, with government is paying for. I mean, unfortunately, the kids are the ones that pay for it. I mean, is there a financial repercussion for the contractor?
I don't have all the answers because I don't have the lease in front of me, but I believe that's not the case, or at least the liability of the lessor is limited. And indeed, it might be difficult actually to get a lessor to sign a lease that contains an unlimited obligation to do exactly what you're wanting. But I don't have the lease in front of me, and I can certainly check.
How loose is that lease? Because it seems pretty loose. I mean, it's pretty loose.
It's the result of a negotiation, and I wasn't there at the negotiations, but I'll certainly take a look at it.
Who the hell is negotiating on behalf of the government?
I don't know.
Because
it took a while ago.
Anyway, okay, we'll get back to the budget. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Senator?
Mr. Chair, if I just on a point of information, just to relay some of the information that the committee has learned through various hearings of the superintendent. So apparently the issue with Okadu and the lease, according to the SOUP, was that the damage from the typhoon wasn't covered in the lease as part of the original negotiation. And then just the other day, he had remarked in the special briefing that they were putting money into this because at the end of the day, the government of Guam is going to end up owning the building. So that's kind of the status of it, is the Okadu campus took a big hit for Mawar, and there was kind of a back and forth about who's responsible for paying for that, and it ended up being GDOE putting in, I think, upwards of $5 million for repairs. So just want to see.
Yes.
I mean, don't they have an insurance? I mean, insurance?
No, but Senator Lujan, and just add on to his point of information.
Okay.
When the lease was created and drafted and signed almost 20 years ago, many of the inspection requirements at public health changed. And when they changed after the typhoon, there was a demand that they be able to fund it and pay for it. That is not part of that lease then. And then part of like the typhoon was, you need to keep in mind, we haven't had typhoon for over 20 years. When that was signed, there was no requirement then. But all repairs and damages.
Mr. Chairman, but even with the typhoon, even if we hadn't had it in over 20 years, it has to be inclusive. We're in Typhoon Alley, so we will have it. So to not include typhoon damages is just asinine.
And you're correct, but unfortunately, it wasn't. And then that's where the chair of education is finding out all the mess.
He's
that
just now
happened
finding out?
No, that's when he found out during all his hearings that
just
20
another-
years ago, many changes. came
Mr.
in.
Chair, so again, the Department of Education has continuously said that the issue really is that the contract was negotiated between the governor at the time and
That's correct.
the leasers and not the Department of Education.
That's correct. It wasn't DOE, because I was the chairman then. It was all done by the governor. Anyway, moving along to your question.
Okay. No, I mean.
Yes, Senator Fisher, you have
Yes, thank you, Chair. I rise to a point of information. Cortec is required to repair those schools. Who allowed the taxpayer to take a bath for $5 million to do repairs on a school that they are legally bound to do through contract?
Understood.
That's ridiculous.
Okay,
Well, relax.
okay. Senator Lujan, go ahead and continue, please.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, again, moving forward, we have to really scrutinize these contracts. I'll move forward. But anyway, proceeding, in regards to, Steve, in regards to the license fees and permits from January to what, again, was submitted versus OFBs, it looks like there's increase of about $2.2 million, right? Something like that? I'm sorry, 13% increase in regards to license and fees. 13, from January's to the OFB submission. Did we increase fees in licenses and permits?
Yes, Senator. Again, when we consider these numbers, we look, one of the major things we look at is the tracking, and they're actually tracking above the level of FY24. So we consider that moving forward, and I believe that's what represents the $1 million difference between the FY24 level and versus what's being appropriated in the FY25.
Okay, so basically more licenses. I mean, what I'm trying to find out is more licenses being issued, or is this a result of fee increases? More permits, more licenses, or just fee increases?
That one, Senator, I need to probably go back and get more detail. All we did was just take basically what's being collected in the
if we can, I mean, to see whether more licenses were issued, because it could be a result of that, or less licenses issued, but the fees has increased. But let me also ask this, my time's almost up. In regards to special run revenues, increased by $2.2 million. Why is it the Healthy Futures Fund revenues is expected to decline? Why is that?
Senator, if you look at even last year's revenues, the Healthy Future Fund basically has been taking a hit simply because the bottom line is we're not collecting. That's attributed to what I've been told is that right now there's a decrease in actual smokers and cigarettes versus an increase in vaping. So a lot of
increase in vaping?
Yes.
Increase in vaping, that's taken over smoking?
Yes, and that's apparently what's happening because the utilization of, the collections in the Healthy Future Fund is taking a drastic hit. Right now, we're anticipating a 10.5 million shortfall for FY24.
Okay.
Last year, I think we were at 7 or 8 million shortfall. So we see the rapid decline in that particular revenue
Okay.
category.
Okay. Okay. Now, also the manpower development funds, that's collected by H2 worker applications. And of course, the number goes over about 5,000 FY23. Why do we expect that number to decline by 1.23 million in manpower development compared from the submission from the administration to your submission? Why do we expect that decline when I mean?
In our conversation with actually Department of Labor, they indicated that although construction will maintain at its current level, they don't foresee any increase in actually H2 workers coming in, but they will maintain the level of construction workers they have now. Taking that into account, I believe in the executive budget, they estimated a $13 million projected revenue in the Manpower Development Fund. If you look at current year right now, it's 12. Given the information we see from Department of Labor, we thought it was more prudent just to keep it at a status quo, at the same level at 12 million.
Oh, okay, so they won't increase, it won't decrease, it'll just stay.
From what we were
Okay.
told, yes.
Okay, yeah, no, because I was just wondering, because we get that money from them, and I know that has increased a lot. I mean, I remember the last time I was in the legislature, and if that number, I mean, because they pay annually, right? That's an annual payment?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My time is up.
Thank you, Senator Lujan. We'll now proceed to Senator Roy Canada. You have any questions or comments for the panel?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, you know, I want to thank OFB and BBMR and DOA for all your hard work on the budget preparation. I know that it's not easy to, you know, review everyone's requests, and we're all certainly wanting to give everyone what they request, right, if we could. But can you explain how OFB figured out the recommended level for general fund revenues, especially when it comes to income tax with the BPT?
Can you repeat your question again, Senator?
Can you explain how OFB figured out the recommended level for general fund revenues, especially when it comes to the income tax of BPT?
Okay.
Yes, Senator. Our office uses various methods. It could be from a 3-year average, based on even 2-year average to get more recent figures. We even look at current tracking. We also compare that against the executive budget requests. In particular to business privilege tax, we based it on the average of the 2023 CRE collections and OFB, the tracking for this fiscal year.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to clarify, not every, the BPT is not directed to all businesses. It's only businesses that are upwards of 500,000, right? Because my understanding, there's certainly businesses that only pay 3%.
Yes, Senator. The BBT actually applies to everybody across the board. It's just there are certain businesses based on the thresholds of their income that will be given certain consideration on how much they actually pay for the BBT.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And also from BBMR's testimony, it looks like the general fund revenues are on track to hit 1.31 billion, right, for FY 2024. How does OFB justify its estimated general revenues of 994 million? DOA, you want to comment on that?
With respect, Senator, I leave it to them because that was their estimate, not ours.
Yes, Senator. Again, you know, in totality, when we do the revenues, we consider all categories going across the board. And based on the tracking, like we've done at least for the last 3 years, which has resulted in excess revenues even beyond what we anticipate to collect, we thought at this point that would be one of the best considerations to utilize as we move forward and estimate and project for these revenues. In the case of FY24, we are looking at 851 million. What we're tracking now is over 1.30 billion dollars. So again, if you go back 1 year and ask, was it even likely for us to excess 100 million? Well, that's the $100 million question. But we did increase the budget last year over the FY23 current year, budget level, which resulted again in an excess amount. So going forward in FY25, we're taking the same approach, but again, myself and OOB, we take a more conservative approach and not appropriate everything we think we're going to collect, but at least give some sort of, if you may call it, a cushion in the event things don't materialize as we all think and we expect.
Thank you so much. Certainly, in any credit usage, right, we want to minimize our debt ceiling, right? We want to maximize I think it's like a 70-30, right? Only use 30%, protect yourself with 70 for your credit use. So I think in this case, it's very important for us to ensure that we don't max out the credit card line, right? And ensure that we have a conservative punch that we have to protect ourselves, right? And I think also for our what do you call it, fiscal responsibilities with some of the bond marketing out there, we need to ensure that we have our liabilities, bonded, right? In the event we default on something, that there's cash in the black hand, right? That can be washing out our negatives. Okay, thank you so much for that. You also mentioned that the lower revenue projection, if met, or no, I disregard that, sorry. I think that's it. Everyone else, Senator Guåhan asked some of the questions I already wanted to ask, so thank you guys, OFB, BBMR, and DOA for your guys' swift accounting and, budget projections. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Caneta. Senator Fisher, do you have any questions or comments for the panel?
I do, thank you. Mr. Chair, do we still have this slide presentation? I'm holding up the one that's...
Yes, we do.
Could we put it up on the screen?
All right. We'll have the folks in the back, the media folks, put it up. Any specific page you wanted?
Well, I'm going to go through the...
Oh, you're
if
going
we
to
can just begin, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Oh, Jesus. Thank you very much. Okay, this is what we received yesterday, and you presented it to us. This is the fiscal year 2025 budget and allocation overview. Could we go to page 2? Thank you. Now, we see here it says revenue summary, and at the bottom of the page it says $834,221.00. Is that the total of the general fund revenue, the special fund revenue, and the federal matching grants and aid to anyone?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to focus on what are labeled general fund revenue and special fund revenue. These dollars that we see for general fund revenues and special fund revenues, could you explain how any dollar that the government receives goes into the general fund or goes into a special fund?
Senator, I believe you can categorize the revenues in two different ways when the government collects it. One, there is an account which we call the general fund, which is normally all funds are deposited into this fund if there's no special account created to account for those funds. So everything else the government of Guam collects goes into this general fund account.
So a dollar will make its way into the special fund, I assume pursuant to some sort of legislative outlay?
You're correct.
Are the monies that flow into the special fund, are they dedicated for a particular purpose?
By the creation of the fund, Senator, yes.
So when we look at the revenue summary, we can see right off that $212,273,986 have essentially already been assigned. Is that correct?
When you use the word assign,
Dedicated for a particular purpose.
we project and estimate that that's the amount of funds that we collected in these various special funds, yes.
Okay. Now, is the governor or the legislature, without changing the law, are we free to take money out of the special funds and just throw it into the general fund? Or are we prohibited from doing that?
By the creation of the special fund itself, I think that is a safeguard that these funds can only be collected and deposited into those accounts by law.
In the special fund account?
Yes.
Okay, I got it. Over on the right side, we see federal matching grant in aid for $95,358. Are these federal funds that are coming into Guam?
No, this federal match, this is the matching funds that that the federal government actually provides to fund these federal programs administered by the government.
Okay, so this is pretty much the same question as to the special fund. The $190 million and change that are federal matching grants and aid, are those, in a sense, this is probably not the right word, but are they earmarked for particular purposes?
For budgetary purposes, yes.
Okay. All right. So when we say revenue summary, we're looking at 3 different pots of cash. Is that one way to look at it?
Yes. Okay. As one way to provide local matching to these grants.
Okay. And if we could go to page 3. Now, this is fiscal year 2025 general fund OFB recommended level. What do you mean by recommended?
Senator, this basically is the recommendation levels for these revenue categories that OFB comes out with.
Okay.
Based on our analysis and all the things that we do to come up with these levels, these are the levels that OFB recommends.
Okay.
But the body is more than able and willing and capable of going ahead and amending these levels.
Okay, you say OFB recommended level at the top. Would it also be accurate to say OFB projected level, or are these 2 different things?
They're one of the they're the same, most the same thing. You consider it.
Okay, thank you very much. By the way, you just mentioned what is OFB? What is your job?
Office of Finance and Budget, Senator, basically is an office within the Appropriations Committee. And our job basically is, the main focus of what we do is to prepare a budget for the government of Guam for the next upcoming fiscal year. Okay. During the course of the year, we take a lot of time and effort to go and dig up information, do analysis, kind of watch the trend of what the government is going through to see whether or not collections are coming in to meet the expected revenues or the recommended levels that we actually pass in a budget, and make recommendations to both determine or provide any type of financial assistance to the senators as requested.
Okay, is your function largely analytical?
For the most part, yes.
All right, thank you for those answers. But isn't it also true that the governor's office prepares a budget or a proposed budget?
The administration basically submits an executive budget to the legislature, and that budget basically is a plan on how to spend their level of anticipated revenues to be collected in the upcoming fiscal year for the next 12 months.
Okay, and so the governor prepares a budget for the executive branch. And it sounds like OFB's job is a little bit bigger than that. Is that correct?
Bigger in the sense that we need to provide funding for all three branches of government, yes.
So so the OFB will address from time to time situations that are not what the governor would address.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. We're still looking at page 3. And I wanted to ask you, this just as a way of example, top line, individual income taxes. Fiscal year of public law, 47-42. I guess this was a projection of $94,592,037. Is that what the legislature recommended?
That is the level that through the process of preparing the FY2025 budget, that was the final recommended and approved level.
Okay. The reason I'm going through these questions is because it may be that many people watching don't know, including myself, frankly, don't know how to read this. And I want to make sure that I understand it and anybody who's watching understands it. Staying on the individual income taxes, we have an executive request for 2025 of $96,396,964. I said request, that was inaccurate. This is what the executive branch believes they need or they will receive?
This is what they estimate to collect in that particular category, yes.
Okay, and it looks like if we move to the right, we see that your office, OFB, says $105,570,171. Why is your level, well, that's not a very good question. Your level does not match the executive request. Why would that be?
Again, Senator, just keep in mind that when the executive budget was prepared, it was prepared back, so they start this thing November, December, and they finally submit it to the legislature in January. When they prepare these numbers, they're using basically historical data plus any current revenues they receive up to that point, which is actual. We're given actually the luxury, OFB, to utilize more accurate data going forward because we don't need to prepare but we don't prepare the budget request until July of this year, giving us more suitable numbers to utilize. And based on the tracking, we notice that in these categories where you see an increase over the executive budget is because based on the tracking and the data we receive, it shows that these categories can sustain an increase in the projection of collections in these categories.
Okay, and then this chart, the general fund, this is an indication in the general fund. We're not talking about special fund, right?
That's correct.
General fund. This shows us where the money is coming from. And if I look at the left, I believe that it comes from income tax. I believe it comes from business privilege tax. I believe there are federal sources. There's use of money and property, licenses, fees, department charges. Those categories are where the money is coming from. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. I'm going to get a little bit in the weeds here. If we go into business privilege tax, we see other taxes, and it says, and the OFB's got it at 9.270630. What are those other taxes?
Yeah, those taxes, Senator, are basically use taxes. They're categorized in the revenue account as use taxes, separate and apart from business privilege.
Okay, and a use tax, that's kind of a term of art. Can you tell us what a use tax is?
Give me a second, I'll give you a breakdown of what the use tax comprises.
Well, I mean, just more broadly than that. Is a use tax, for example, what Guam might charge somebody if they purchase a car off island and then bring it here?
My understanding, Senator, that the business privilege tax is for business, whereas the use tax is more for personal taxes.
Okay. All right. Okay, thank you for that answer. Under federal sources, we see federal income tax collection and use projected at 76,402,101. Is that what we refer to as Section 30 money?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, so this is the mysterious Section 30 money. I think what happens is people come to Guam, they're subject to federal taxation, say a contractor. The federal government collects that money and then sends it back to Guam. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, under Section 30 of some code, CFR or whatever. So that's the Section 30 money. Okay, could we go on to page 4, please? Now, could you tell me, this is general fund subsidies. What does that mean by subsidies? Are those outlays?
Senator, yes. What these dollar amounts are monies that we need to set aside.
Okay.
You know, based by law. You have provisions for tax refunds. That's the amount that we set aside to cover all tax refunds the government owes out in the fiscal year.
Okay.
We have earned income tax credits. Those are the ones that the federal government kind of like provides Guam. We have the child tax credit, again, the same thing. Those are the tax, I would believe, refunds that the government of Guam gets from taxes that the federal government will pay.
Okay.
Then you go into the GMH Pharmaceutical Fund. That is automatic by law. Whatever the total general fund is, you set aside 6.19%, which goes directly into the pharmaceutical fund, which goes direct to GMH.
Okay.
PJ and Gym, the
I'm sorry?
National Tennis Federation, the Guam National Football Federation are basically tax exempt credits that were given to these associations, which these are monies that would normally have been collected to the government of Guam had it not been issued these tax credits.
Okay, is this, so when we see the, for the Teeds and Gymnasium, for example, it says $250,000. That is not, that doesn't indicate that Guam is actually writing a check for $250,000. Merely, we thought we would get the money, but now we're not because it's a tax credit for.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know those tax credits? Do they expire?
There is a time frame, a period for them, for each one of them.
Okay, so we don't have, I mean, this is not a zombie credit. It will sunset.
Oh, yeah, there is a timeline for these credits,
Okay.
and then after that, they will expire.
Okay, I've just got a couple more questions on this page, just so I can understand it. In the top right, we see that the provision for tax returns, gross provision for tax refunds, is $175,604,534. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But in reality, Guam doesn't need to save all that money or park that in a special fund because we know that we are going to be getting $57,296,793 from the feds. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so why set aside that money? We can use it. We also know that the child tax credit and the additional child tax credit from the feds, we're going to receive $74,162,230. So we can subtract that as well. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, can you repeat your question? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Senator.
I'm just kind of analyzing this block. We're saving 175 in gross. But we don't have to save that much money because the feds are going to give us $57 million and another $74 million. So we really only need, Guam to be safe really only needs to save or put aside $44,145,311. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay, and then I think this is almost the last page. This is, we're looking at page 5, which is general fund allocations. Now, this chart it just shows us how the money is allocated in a, well, it's not quite a pie chart, but in a
That's correct.
visual, okay. All right. And if we added all these percentages, 34 for public education and 18 for protection of life and property and general government, et cetera, and so forth, it would roughly come up to 100%, correct?
That's correct.
So this chart lets us know that all of the money is accounted for.
Yes.
Okay. And if we could go to page 6, please. Why do we have 8, 9 different entities that are classified as reserves? Could you explain that?
If you notice, These departments and branches of government are basically not under the purview of the executive branch. But in the preparation of the executive budget, funds need to be allocated to fund these particular agencies and branches of government. So if you look at the executive budget, it's going to show you all the executive branch or anything under the purview of the governor being allocated a dollar amount versus this particular category, which we call reserve.
Okay.
What they do is they lump sum all these departments into a category in the executive budget and title it reserve. They apportion portion of that their projected revenue to fund these categories.
Okay, is this I don't know what the word would be, this delineation or this categorization of these things, is that a function of law, or is it an accountancy process?
When you say accountants of law, the way I would respond is that the governor is not actually responsible to allocate funding any specific dollar amount to these agencies because she's not accountable for these agencies or branches of government. But what she does in the executive branch budget, the executive budget, she will set aside a portion of the expected revenues to be collected. And then normally it's the task of OFB, when we prepare the budget, to allocate X amount of dollars needed to fund these agencies and branches of government.
Okay. And I guess this is probably one of my final questions, I guess, and I'm just going to put my foot in it. Because the governor has very little control over the Department of Education, if any. Why is the Department of Education not included in the reserves category?
From my understanding, Senator, this was many years ago, GOD was actually under the control of the governor. And I guess either through an executive order, they kind of like broke apart, set up, and created the board. Ever since that happened, the actual control under DOE was no longer under the governor. It is actually laid in the hands of Guam Education Board.
Okay.
And since then, she is, I believe, not only her, but in the prior administrations, they have just taken the position that because it's not under their control, they're not really sort of like responsible, basically, to fund for it. But they do include it in their budget, and as part of the educational funds requirement, to fund these educational agencies and institutions.
Okay.
I don't know why it's still there, but as they reflect it as part of the executive branch, we go ahead and accept it as such.
Senator, if I could add to that, I think the principal reason is that the finances of the Department of Education are part of the general fund. Part of the general fund.
Part of the general fund?
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay.
But Senator Fisher, it was by law. It was created that the DOE would be separate and the Board of Education is going to run the school.
Right.
With the superintendent.
Okay, and I think that's correct. I just wanted to clarify, or thank you for clarifying it. That would explain why. Well, I guess it really doesn't make any difference at the end of the day, you know, who's writing which check or which fund it's coming out of. But okay, so that explains why the DOE is not within the reserves. Okay, I got that. And then the last page is page 7. Which is special funds summary. Could we look at school lunch reimbursements? The OFB, I guess this is a projection, projects $12,504,000 for school lunches. That seems remarkably low. That's just $1 million a month. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding. $1 million a month to feed 24,000 students? That can't be right. Is there more than $12 million for school lunch programs?
I understand, Senator. Based on the information comes from GDOE, that is the amount they've listed as their annual requirement for the school lunch breakfast program. I believe to a certain extent, there might be some subsidies, local subsidies attributing to the program. If they are doing that, they're doing it internally within their appropriation amount. But what has been requested in the budget for the last several years is this 12 million.
Okay, so when you say reimbursement, this doesn't necessarily include a federal reimbursement.
Yes, sir, these are federal funds. Sorry. These are the federal reimbursement funds.
I only got 1 second.
Mr. Byrne was referring to the school lunch program. It's federally, it's a federal program.
Well, the only thing I'm saying is we serve over 500,000 meals a month. I can't believe we do that for $1 million. Thank you. Thank you, Tello.
All right, thank you. Anything else, Senator Fisher? You have, oh, you're out. Senator Tello.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to OFB team for putting together this budget and, of course, meeting with me earlier last week to discuss, or this week. Okay, fire alarm. Okay, it stopped. Okay, don't count that on my time, please. Take away that 3 seconds for fire alarm. Anyways, it's a grueling task what you have in front of you, trying to figure the costs, and I greatly appreciate in the last 3 budgets, or 4 budgets actually, since I've been in the legislature, we've been very conservative on our numbers, to a point that the excess revenue that come in every year is more comforting than it is, worrisome, because what we don't want to see is end up in a deficit. So I think it's important that we stay that conservativeness. However, there are a lot of agencies that need assistance. I'm seeing places like Department of Public Works that are not being funded, only additional 500,000. We're talking about road repairs. 500,000 was the only increase that I saw in DPW. I see that the Healthy Futures Fund still not incorporating enough funding for there, where the law clearly states that 15% of the special funds out of the Healthy Futures funds shall go to the Cancer Foundation, which again should yield about $3.5 million based on your number, but it's only coming in at $1 million. I need to see that the executive branch too followed the same suit of only $1 million. So it brings me to the question on Mr. Burns. I know that Lester's not here. Hopefully he can answer my question, but you're asking us to replenish back the Guam Cultural Repository and other areas that was different from the original bill that was substituted. And now we have another bill on the floor that's substituted on the floor that changed these areas. Are you requesting that we increase the budget by $10 million? Or are you requesting that we just revert it back, instead of giving it to the University of Guam, go directly into the Guam Cultural Respiratory? So I'm just trying to figure that out. Is that an additional $10 million? Or just reverse what was done by this substituted bill on the floor?
Yes, thank you, Senator. Yes, it was in the first version of 1.6 million and was taken out in the second version. And I think this is actually the third version, but it's also omitted from the third version.
So, and then OFB mentioned that it's already incorporated, the 1.6 million for the repository is already in the University of Guam. Can you tell me where in that section? Because usually it's segregated on the cost, like one going to Wikipedia, some going to cancer care, some. I don't see it in here for the repository.
Yes, Senator. In the original bill that we submitted, it was included, but having gone back again and kind of like reassess what we did in the allocation and the need to provide additional funding for example, UOG and stuff like that, we took it out with the assumption that we would address this and another two other items of concern through a separate bill utilizing the excess revenues of FY24.
Oh, so that's the intent.
Yes.
Is that the intent for the other categories?
I believe there's two of them. One is the Guam Culture Repository, and the other one is the GPD Forensic Crime Lab, the HVAC system. Those are the two that we identified that we would like to address in a separate bill, other than that in the budget bill.
Okay, and then it says in this document that was submitted to us by BBMR that on the bottom line, Unified Judiciary Ops, first version was unbalanced by 889,318. Can you explain that?
Yes, Senator. It was just kind of like an oversight, an error in the bottom line, but the actual amount was the difference of $889,319. It was just an error in the bottom line.
Okay, so it's not reflected in the substitute on the floor bill. I mean, our bill, it's fine. In other words, we're not having excess 889,000 somewhere.
No.
It's all fully expended.
Yes.
Well, I'm trying to find some money for the Cancer Foundation over at the University of Guam, because I have to tell you, since I've been in this legislature, we have been constantly ignoring the law that says 15%. And if you look at how many fundraisers have we all been, given tickets to go to for people who have cancer, there's at least 10 a week. And here we're only still giving them $1 million? So, Mr. Chair, I'm advocating for something right now, and I hope you hear me, because I'm going to try and find that money. Else everyone's going to be coming to us and asking us to help them to get treatment. I mean, this is our job, and okay, enough of that advocating. We got to go back to the budget and the net assessment here. When I came to see an OFB, I came to see you, there was an increase that you said that the governor of $48 million of increase for the governor on her request from FY24. Okay, so from FY24, she had an additional $48 million increase, and then then OFB added an additional $46 million increase. That's a total of $94 million increase. But if people see the budget bill, they'll say, well, no, it's more than a $94 million increase, because it's more like $130 million increase. But that's because we're incorporating the federal funds in it. So my first question is, on the $48 million increase by the governor, where is this money going to?
I believe, Senator, this is exactly I think this is the same information I just provided to Senator Fisher, but I'll go ahead and repeat it again. Okay.
No, I mean, okay. Is this the one where it's organic growth, GPD? I'm talking about 1.1 cycle, GFD 1.3, DOC 2.1 million. That's the one I want to hear. I didn't hear that.
That is the $48 million increase.
Okay. And you went through that list with Senator Fisher?
Yes.
Okay. Then it is concurrent then. DYA at 2 million, public health at 7.5. Department of Public Health.
That's correct.
Okay. And then on the 46 million was 8 million retirement, and 5 million was DOC for the 46 that OFB did on their own to increase. Did you mention that one?
I can go down the list
let's
to
do that
represent
one
the
then.
46.
Let's do the OFB, because I don't want you to have to repeat yourself. I
Okay.
have the numbers here. I just wanted the public to hear it as well. So if you've already mentioned it, that's good. So let's go to the 46 million that OFB increased the budget to, and where did it go?
Okay. The 46 million, that represents an increase over the governor's executive budget, includes the OHAP, which is 1.1 million.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You said the governor's executive. I want to go to just OFB's 46 since
Right.
you haven't brought it up. Okay, just a minute.
So this is on top of the governor's $48 million request, okay? So for the Office of Homeless, we set aside 1.06 million. For Guam GPD, the salary pay adjustment of 8.7 million. DOC Modernization Act, 5 million. Guam Memorial Hospital, to cover the increase in operation and nurses' pay of 5 million. Guam Behavioral Health, 6.1 million to cover the shortfall in the Healthy Future Fund. Because just to let you know, Guam Behavioral Health is normally 100% funded out of the Healthy Future Fund. But since the Healthy Future Fund is not performing, we had to subsidize it with the general fund.
Okay, one moment there. Whenever BBMR gives us a CRER report, they take out the section where we're short in Healthy Futures Fund.
That's correct.
Okay, so they've incorporated in that. So when they told us the other day that we had $27 million in the CRE report for the month of July,
Yes,
they've incorporated the 3 bills that were passed recently.
that's correct.
And they've taken into effect the $12.9 million of Healthy Futures Fund shortfall.
That's correct.
So they're utilizing excess revenue to cover that in FY24 excess revenue. So why would you be taking 6.5 into Guam Behavior and Wellness to cover that when it's already being covered in special funds? And it could be, oh, so you're anticipating by spending any excess revenue.
No, Senator,
That-
you're referring to FY24 operation. The shortfall in FY24
Right.
operation is being covered by the excess general fund.
Right. What you're doing is that we are utilizing what is anticipated in excess revenue and already paying that out right now, because we are not as conservative in FY20. In other words, we're not as conservative in FY24 as we have been in FY25 as we are in 24 and 23 and 22.
No, Senator,
So-
just keep in mind, when you talk about using excess revenue, you're talking about the operation of FY24.
Right,
What
right.
we're doing here is we're appropriating for the department in FY25, taking into account what is happening in FY24.
Right.
Only in terms of the revenue collection in the Healthy Future Fund.
What is your estimate on collections for Healthy Futures Fund in FY25?
In the current budget, Senator, what was projected was $33 million. In FY24 OFP projection, we are projecting $23 million.
I'm sorry, can you do 24 again?
33 million?
Okay. And that showing so far, I mean, we're trending to almost $13 million shortfall currently,
In the Healthy Future Fund?
right, for FY24.
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a couple more months to go,
Yes.
right? So if we're trending, it's looking like more like almost $1 million a month. So we could get at about 14, right?
We could get up as high as 14 million by
Yeah.
the end of the year, yes.
Right. Okay,
So that's why in FY25, we're only projecting 23 million in the Healthy Future Fund.
Okay, 23, but if you were to assess the 33 and 24,
Uh-huh.
and then look at what we're trending now, you're looking at a loss of 14 million, okay? That leaves you 29 million in the Healthy Futures Fund. That is a reality for FY24, basically the reality. But you've gone further down to only 23 million.
Yes, so
What do you base that on when you're already seeing the trends, but it's, you know, I don't see anything really changing out, but why would you do that when 33, okay, let me just reiterate that, 33 million was anticipated in 2024. 14 million is what is showing as a shortfall, leaving at 29 million. So, but you've decided to go even further down in FY25 at 23 million shortfall. So I want to know what the real substantial change that caused you to be very short.
Yeah, if you're taking the 33, Senator, and minus the 14 is actually 19 million.
Okay, my DI math is wrong then. 2, 1, yep, 19. Ah, so there.
That's okay. So what
That's
we're
my
doing
DI
now
math.
is we're taking into account the trend that's happening, but we're also thinking that, you know, hopefully we have another 12 months next year of
Right.
improving the collection of the fund.
2, 1.
Not so much to keep the same trend as we do all the other categories.
12, 19, so 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. So 4 million. You're just going up a little bit, like 4 million more in FY25.
Yeah.
So you want to cover Guam Behavioral Wellness, $6.1 million with the general fund money instead of special funds, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, after 6.1 from the general, what else is there?
Okay, we have the charter school at 3.9 million.
0.9, okay.
And that's the reason for that increase. It's increasing the student costs from 7,500 to 7,800. The next one is UOG at 4.2 million to cover the increase in faculty pay and operations.
I'm sorry, say that, the
4.2 million for UOG
is,
to cover the increase in faculty pay and operations.
faculty?
Yes,
This is salaries?
yes.
And okay, keep going.
Okay, the mayor's council, 4.2 million to cover the community maintenance workers. And the Office of Attorney General at 2 million to cover the attorney pay plan and vacancies for the attorneys' positions.
Okay. Can you explain the mayor's council one at 4.2?
Yes. Over the last 2 years, we've kind of like went back and forth on how to fund the community workers. And what we did is we sat down actually with the administration and asked them, is there any possible way that you guys can help pay this obligation? The governor was willing, at least for the last 2 years, to utilize her fund sources to pay for the community workers over the last 2 budgets. My understanding, the use of those funds was ARP money. Those ARP monies are no longer available in FY25, so now we are incorporated into the budget now as an obligation that we need to pay.
Wow.
Just to let you know, last year, you know, Senator Brown did bring this up to our attention, and I explained that yes, you know, I mean, to some degree, we should own up and appropriate outright to cover this expense, but at the time, the governor made the commitment to us that she would go ahead and pay it, and that's how we just dealt with it in the FY24 budget, by giving her the authorization to utilize whatever funds available to her to cover this expense.
Okay, Mr. Byrne, can you explain, you said earlier there's a question if there's any more liability that the government of Guam may have. Can you explain the situation at Homeland Security where the Office of OPA have brought up, you know, the 43 million that was may have to be paid back, and what is the status right now?
Yes, thank you, Senator. The 43 million is question costs. That's a technical accounting, auditing term for costs that are still, I guess, still under investigation. We met with FEMA last week, and there is a process being agreed to try and reduce those question costs in cooperation with FEMA by producing the missing documents if they're missing, or dealing with the disputed charges and trying to resolve them. It's an ongoing process. I understand that FEMA has set a target of March 2025 for a final report to be produced jointly by FEMA and the government on that process.
And where are we now? I mean,
Well,
how much has that been assessed?
FEMA,
I hear you, Mr. Fisher. I know my time is up, but he hasn't answered the full question. I'm just wanting to finish his question. If that's okay with you, okay then.
Okay,
So
I'm happy,
finish to where we
I'm
are.
happy
Yeah.
to answer that part.
I'm sorry.
I'm happy to answer that part.
Okay.
Right? So
Yes, thank you.
FEMA did not know. The 43 million is based upon an external audit. They've not had any further discussions with Premier, who are the auditors. They came mainly to deal with the process. So it's an ongoing process, and FEMA didn't have any updates for us or for themselves on that number, except to say that it's an ongoing process and March 2025 is the target for resolving them all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a point of information, Mr. Chair, that I was told that there was 20 million has already been relieved by Homeland Security from the federal government, so we're still looking at at least 23 or 21 million more to go to try and get waived, so.
Yes, there's some good information coming out, but it's not confirmed yet.
Okay.
And you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Senator Frank, you'd be the last one for round one. Sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the panel. You know, quite honestly, a lot of the questions that I had have been asked and answered, so this is going to be pretty quick, okay, if you will. You know, I guess just like my other colleagues, you know, when you go from initially general fund revenues from 909 million up to 994 million, which is an $85 million increase, which results in a grand total of revenues available of 1,308,834,221, which amounts to $139,936,403 increase in our budget. I guess the question is, how did we get in a 7-month time period $139 million increase, close to $140 million increase in a budget request or in budget requests? How did we find almost $140 million in 7 months that we didn't find in January? Or that we didn't realize? More so, $140 million in costs in the last 7 months that weren't anticipated, that should have been anticipated. Where did all this come from? You know, Mr. Guerrero, I'm sure you can appreciate and you can understand. not even 2 decades ago, $139 million, would amount to almost 1/3 the operating budget of the government. Now it's considered pennies if we can come up with it in just 7 months. So can somebody provide to me an explanation as to how we got to 100, how did we become almost $140 million richer and $140 million more in costs? Somebody?
Senator, I'll make a stab at answering your question, and I'm not really responding to these particular numbers because they're OFB's numbers, but in general, right? Mr. Carlson mentioned yesterday that the estimated revenues for fiscal 24 are now over $1 billion. That arises from additional collections of taxes, some part of which is just, inflation. There's been many discussions over the years about taxing or not taxing inflation, but costs have increased. And if you've got a tax that's a percentage of a cost, that tax revenue is going to increase too. Mr. Guerrero mentioned earlier that some part of the income taxes is due to additional remuneration paid to government workers, but a lot of it is due to additional revenues from remuneration paid to private sector workers, because he mentioned that withholdings have increased. So we're not alone in seeing increases in costs. All over the United States, all over the world, costs are increasing. And revenues, if revenues are available to meet those costs, then I can assure you that certainly as far as the administration is concerned, we do our best to control those costs. And the control of those costs over the last few years has led to an element of the budget surpluses that we've been reporting in our financials. But the exact calculations I'll leave to Mr. Guerrero, but that's my understanding of the general picture that you see in this budget.
Okay, well, it just goes to the proverbial question, cart before the horse. Which is the cart and which is the horse? First off, when you look at, I think it's pegged almost close to 12% increase in our budget for this year alone, in comparison to last year. Is this budget, first off, going back to the cart and the horse, which is the cart and which is it what we anticipate or what we project to be our revenues, or what the government desires to have as its operating budget? Because it appears when you see $139 million increase in the budget in 7 months, that it looks like, okay, the government needs to pay for this. We want to pay for this. We want to do this and we want to do that. So therefore, in order for us to be able to fund this, we got to be able to increase the revenues.
That's budgeting. I mean, it's not just governments that budget that way.
I tell you what, if I budgeted in my business right now the same way, I'd be in trouble. I'd be in trouble.
Well, this is different, right?
Yeah, obviously it's different, Mr. Byrne, because the thing is the government likes to. I'm going to use up my time. The government spends the money, and it relies on the community to make the money. And and I appreciate your defense of this. Somebody's got to stand up for the community here and say, For God's sake, tourism is down 50%. Retailers, it was mentioned yesterday, retailers still, you know, looking for people to work. People are struggling to pay their bills. I'm struggling to keep my business alive. But it doesn't seem like the government's struggling at all. And that doesn't require a response, or of course, that's just a remark and a statement that I need to make. There is one, actually, that I want. This, and I appreciate the work that it's been, that it's doing, but I noticed that we've got an increase in the amount for Office of Homeless Assistance. How was that created? How was that entity created? No, Mr. Byrne.
Are you, sir, are you referring to the, what are you referring to? Maybe I should ask that question. No, I understand that, but what part of are you talking about the funds, or?
No. How was that office created?
It's part of the Office of the Governor.
When was it created?
I think about a year ago,
A year ago.
more.
How was it initially funded?
Mostly by ARPA funding.
ARPA funding. And so, there's not enough ARPA funding to be able to sustain this until 2026?
Well, ARPA funding is running out.
Yes.
It has to be.
It has to be encumbered by 2024,
Yes,
but
yes.
expended by 2026.
Yes.
I'm asking is if ARPA funds can be utilized to be able to continue to fund it until 2026. Why is it now becoming a government liability?
Well, you could ask the question the other way around. Why wouldn't it be a government liability?
Well, no.
Because it's
First
going
things
to,
first, because one of the things that
because
we
it's
were
going to
assured
be a
of
continuing
is
program.
that anything that was funded with ARP funds was going to be staying at ARP funds. This government has a habit of being able to take on responsibility, take on different programs, and then transfer the liability over to the taxpayers of Guam.
May I finish?
Sure.
If you're asking why was that decision taken, this is
Yes.
going to be a continuing program. So at some point you have to cross over, and the decision was taken, not unreasonably, to cross over at this time.
Okay, just earlier we had a discussion about how the mayors, the community service workers were funded, and they were funded with ARPA funding until we could pick it up. And then, with regard to the Guam Behavioral Health, because of its shortfalls in the Healthy Futures Fund. Here's a program. Granted, it's needed, but yet it was funded. It was initially funded by ARP funds. It has the ability to be able to continue to be funded until 2026. Why can't we have the discussion about continuing to fund it in 2026, at the end of 2026, as opposed to the start of this fiscal year? I'm not denying the presence or the value of it. It's just that this goes again to, decisions that are made in Adelup that eventually now has to fall onto the backs of the people of Guam. I know you can't answer the question, okay?
I can.
Okay, then then why can't we fund it with IRP funds?
Any decision that's made by Adelup or any decision that's made in this hall is part of the government budget.
Okay.
Each entity must take responsibility for that decision as to how they're funded. In this particular case, as you said, This is a very valuable government program. No one wants to see people homeless. And if we can set up a program that ameliorates that situation, that's a good thing. As far as the ARPA funding is concerned, because this is a continuing program, at some point you have to make that transition.
Why does that point have to be today as opposed to in 2026?
Well,
Is there funding and is there enough funding in the ARP
don't
funds?
forget that ARPA funding has to be obligated by December.
By December.
A lot of
Today
this,
is just
a lot,
August.
A lot of this is personnel costs.
Okay, let me ask you something, Mr. Byrne. Is there enough funding in the ARP funds right now to be able to fund this office?
If that decision were made, yes, but other programs
No,
are
that's all
demanding,
I wanted was a yes or no.
other
Thank you.
programs are demanding
Thank you, Madam
ARPA
Chair.
funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm done.
Would you like to ask OFB
just
why
leave
they're
it?
subsidizing it?
What's that?
Would you like to ask OFB of why they're subsidizing it?
Why don't I just go ahead and do that?
If I may answer it this way, Senator, when an executive budget basically is presented to the Office of Finance and Budget, it delineates exactly what the obligation of the government is to pay for in the next coming fiscal year. If it's listed as an expense, a program expense, we normally take it as such and we appropriate accordingly. If it's a request made by the governor's office to cover an expense, an existing expense, then we normally will cover it. This is something that was requested by the Office of Finance and Budget that was not part of the executive budget that is asked to be funded. We took the position that we were going to fund it merely because it is a program that is currently in operation in the government. It currently employs positions or people, and that it's an existing program. So we took it as such, like any other program, Guam, and funded it going forward in FY2025.
And I appreciate that, okay? Don't get me wrong. I appreciate that. Mr. Byrne, I appreciate your comments as well. However, simple question, Mr. Guerrero, does the Office of Finance and Budget have the ability to be able to look at what currently is available for in the American Rescue Plan funds?
Other than what is submitted to the legislature monthly on the ARP report, that is to the extent that I have the ability to determine what's being funded out of the ARP funds.
Okay, based on the extent and the reports that you get,
That's correct.
is there funding that is available in that fund? Is there money in that fund?
All I can say, Senator, is there's an available balance on the report. And
How much is that available balance?
If my memory serves me correctly, I think it's like 216 million.
213.
Oh, 230.
Okay, let's, for the purpose of this, let's say 200 million, okay? Right? There's at least $200 million in that account. Is $200 more than sufficient to be able to fund this program until the program is set to expire, all money is expended before 2026?
Senator, if you're asking me based on what's available in the ARP funds, which is over 200 million, this particular program requirement is 1.3 million, then I would safely say yes, but it is not always be positioned to determine how ARP funds are expended.
Okay, and I appreciate it. I'm not asking for your position. I'm just asking about the availability, okay? I'm asking about the availability of it. Again, I'm not going against what that office is mandated to do or set to do. All right? You know, it's just my conservative mind. Okay, how are we able to utilize our funds more effectively and more efficiently recognizing that we have this ability, which we've practiced and we continue to practice, okay, in times past, as recently as last year, because, you know, we asked her to be able to fund, you know, the maintenance workers out of ARP so that we can utilize that funding elsewhere, and she gladly admitted, here in this case, she created this office. Granted, it serves a good purpose, but now all of a sudden it's on our backs. When she still has that ability to be able to use that funding, the funding that's available only to her to be able to fund this. That's the point that I'm making here. Okay? I only have 12 seconds. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minority Leader Senator Blas. Okay, we're going to go in the second round, and what I'm going to do is mix it up a little bit. So I'm going to start from the middle. I'll start with the Vice Speaker. Munya Barnes, you are recognized on the second round.
Sijus Masi, Madam Chair, and Manana Sijus, to our colleagues and to the panel members here. Thank you for being here this morning. My question to BBMR DOA and OVB is, are you familiar with the law that established the Public School Library Resources Fund, especially how the law requires that this fund should be shared between the Guam Department of Education and the Guam Public Library System? Are you familiar with it?
Yes, Senator.
Steve? Yeah, I said, just wanted to know if they're familiar with it, yes or no.
Okay, Vice Speaker, can you stop the clock for a minute? Okay.
I did.
Go ahead and repeat it again, so
Okay.
that your clock is not being run.
Are you familiar with the law that established the Public School Library Resource Fund, specifically how the law requires that this fund be shared between the Guam Department of Education and the Guam Public Library System? Yes or no? Yes.
We are aware of it, Senator.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I would like to read into the record the language of the law I referenced, which is found on Title 17, Chapter 4 of the Guam Code, annotated, Section 4120.1. A, there is hereby created, separate and apart from other funds of the Government of Guam, a non-lapsing revolving fund known as the Public School Library Resources Fund. The fund shall not be co-mingled with the general fund and shall be kept in a separate bank account and administered by the Guam Education Board. 70% of the monies deposited into the fund shall be appropriated to the public school libraries and 30% to the Guam Public Library System. Monies appropriated from the fund shall be exclusively used for the enhancement of learning resources and technology within the public school libraries and the Guam Public Libraries, including but not limited to the purchase of computer equipment for the direct use of students, resources, subscriptions, periodical materials, and other library supplies and materials that directly benefit the students. So, to both of you, can you confirm that the substitute bill in its current form does not comply with the mandates of this law, specifically because it appropriates 100% and not 70% of the Public School Library Resources Fund to GOD and appropriates 0% and not 30% of this fund to the Guam Public Library System? Both of them.
Yes, Senator.
Okay.
Going back, the creation of the fund, the account was in Public Law 27-5. That was creation of the fund. Just recently, through Public Law 36-107, it amended the allocation of the funds collected to both the public library and to the school libraries at a 70-30% rate.
Right. Okay, thank you. So, would you object to correcting this oversight by adjusting the allocations consistent with the mandates of 17 GCA Chapter 4 and the previous budget laws? And the reason why I bring up the past budget loss is because this body is also given the Guam Public Library Systems an additional $200,000 from the Guam Department of Education's share of this fund as well. So the GPLS, per the legislative action, has been receiving the 30% of the funds plus $200,000. So that is not reflected in this substitute bill, and I want to give our finance directors and my colleagues and the public notice that I will be proffering amendments to correct this change in how we fund our public libraries. Just bringing it up and asking what is your perspective?
Making the adjustment, Senator, will not be a problem because it doesn't change the bottom line. The only thing it will do is just reduce the allocation from the education public libraries to the Guam Library, and that's all it does. Making that adjustment will not be a problem.
Do you agree?
Yes, Senator, I agree with what Mr. Guerrero just said. This is not the only instance where a proposed budget conflicts with existing statute. And sometimes it's not corrected in the way you're trying to correct it now. And we take the view at DOA that the budget being more recent trumps any prior legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. So, Madam Chair, I just want to make sure that I noted it to both OFB and, of course, to the administration, but more importantly to this committee, that I really want to help the public libraries as the oversight chair. I think it's important as the library has been really, really active in getting these additional resources. They've tried to get creative to even have the Department of Education order the supplies and all that, but to no avail. I've been working with the Department of Administration, the Department of Education, working with the library, and it's just getting really complicated. So in all fairness to all the stakeholders involved, I want to make sure that I bring the situation up, the situation of concern, and making sure that it's open and that everybody agrees. And so I appreciate their statements, and I will make those amendments accordingly when we go through the chapter. Sizo Smasi. I yield my time back.
Thank you, Madam Vice Speaker. Senator Joanne Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What an interesting morning so far. You know, looking at the numbers, and we had relayed yesterday and the information provided by Senator Blas with regards to the budget totals that have existed over the last, 6 or 7 years. And just looking at those numbers, just from 2019 alone, we're looking at an increase of $352 million in operational costs of the government that we're looking at appropriating if we move forward with the proposed recommendations of this budget from finance, which is about $1.3 billion. Over the last 3 years, we've had an 8% increase in 2023, a 12% increase from the previous budget year in 2024, and a 10%, this is a 10% increase over last year's budget. Prior years to that, we had actually a negative amount in terms of what was appropriated, give or take a few $1 million. And I wanted to ask Mr. Burns, representing the administration, I mean, do you think these growth rates are sustainable? These are unprecedented
these growth rates, well, costs increase are facts. I'm not sure I know, and perhaps I could ask you to expand on what you mean by sustainable.
Well, in terms of our ability of the government at this rate, which is a ferocious increase, are we going to, do you look at, you did say in the past where you're anticipating that the revenues will be there to meet these pay raises and other major obligations that have been put on the ratepayers of Guam. Do you think we can sustain this at 10, 12% increases annually assuming the revenues continue to increase? Do you think they're going to continue every year to absorb Because everything multiplies. I mean, the budget's not going to stay stagnant because obviously we have repeated costs, including payroll, insurance on average every year that continuously goes up, even if everything stayed the same, even if we didn't hire anybody new.
We're sitting here discussing fiscal 25 budget.
Yes.
And whether the expected revenues and the expected costs match. And Mr. Guerrero said they did match. You can debate, and I guess you are examining whether those revenues will in fact materialize. Mr. Carlson said yesterday that we're expecting over $1 billion in fiscal 24 to kind of capitalize on Senator Blas's allegory. That's $1 billion horse.
Mm-hmm.
That horse might run out of steam in 10 years. It might run out of steam in 20 years. I don't have that crystal ball. All I can say is that for the last 5 years, revenues have increased, and that revenue increase has enabled the government, both administration and legislature, to meet some expenses that were deferred for years. And hopefully we will deal with all those and deal with current expenses and current needs, and the needs seem to be ever increasing, as actually Senator Blas said. People have continuing needs. We've used some of those excess revenues to ameliorate the effects of power bills, up to a very large amount. And so that benefit has gone straight back to the power users. That was a result of increased costs. That was a result of increased fuel costs. So do I expect costs to I guess, modify? Yes, I expect inflation to eventually moderate. Medical costs increased by, I think it's like 11% nationally and more than 20% locally. And those costs have to be met too. So I can't tell you what's going to happen in 5 years, 3 years, but I am confident that we do have sufficient revenues in fiscal 25 to match these expected costs in fiscal 25.
But is that the extent of the vision? Is this fiscal year? I mean, I'm always concerned that when we take on these long-term obligations, because they become long-term obligations, what is the sustainability of it? I mean, it was asked earlier by Senator Blas about, and I hope as we go through this budget, Madam Chair, that the OFB outlines what additional costs we're so-called expect to inherit, that this committee, and I'm a member of the committee, I wasn't aware that I concurred on these adding of what was covered by these APPROPRIATIONS funds, that all of a sudden we're just going to absorb that in the general fund. I mean, who made that decision? I didn't see a decision being circulated to the committee members with regards to that. But I want to ask Director Burns, because it was mentioned yesterday by the BBMR director that with regards to the administration, that they have no desire, or I guess no intention of reducing things like the BPT. If we were collecting so much more money, what are we doing to offset that? I mean, is the intent simply for the government to continue to grow every year? Is it going to be another 10%, within 2 years, maybe another 20%, assuming these trends of revenue continue? What cost-cutting measures are being put in place? I mean, what other than absorbing and continue to increase the budget?
Well, it's not like, I think you probably need to make a distinction, if I may respectfully say, Senator, between government spending that goes back into the community and government spending that we need to incur in order to administer the spending that does go back into the community. A very great large percentage, and maybe Mr. Guerrero will be able to tell you that, a very large, great percentage of this increased government spending that you're talking about goes back to the community. You know, public health spending, education spending, all have increased, but it's part of supporting the community. I don't think that if you look at the administrative costs, that they've increased at the same rate that you're talking about.
Well, simply increasing, I don't know. Like I said, I mean, is anyone sitting here saying anything is better with regards to public health in terms of the amount of customers they're serving? Public health provided us information that they're not even outreaching the amount of clients they used to in the last 3 or 4 years since they closed down the public health facility in Manguilo. The hospital, I mean, the same. Are we going to be here a few months from now having to do another subsidy to the hospital again, another 30+ million? Is that running any more effectively? Public safety? I mean, I don't get that impression. I don't get the impression of the people I'm talking to out there in the community that they feel any safer.
Well, that's just an impression, and I really can't comment on that. But my example of the subsidy that went to power ratepayers went straight back to the community.
Yes, that's only one example, but the other costs that the ratepayers are, you know, it's like, you know, window dressing. At the front end, we're telling them how good things are because, look, we've offset $100 to your power bill, but 2 or 3 years from now, what? Are we going to have more rate increases if these revenue trends that we're getting don't continue? Are they going to be, or are they going to see additional increases? I mean, those are real possibilities because we have added an unprecedented amount of costs to this government. I mean, I was here, gosh, 2015, 2016, no, 2006, what? We were looking at debating, do we go 500 million or 525 million or 550 million? That was a budget of the government of Guam. We're almost beyond getting close to tripling.
And in those years, very often, the revenues didn't materialize, and our expenses exceeded our revenues, and that's what's called a deficit.
Well,
that, fortunately, is not happening now.
Well, I guess the people of Guam need to decide whether or not the increased revenue that supposedly the government's getting is somehow having a more direct benefit to them besides $100 off their power bill, because they're, unfortunately, as we all are going to be in tremendous rate shock in the not-too-distant future when this legislature and the administration is not going to be able to cover the $100. Waterworks is already going around having their public hearings on the upcoming rate increases for water. That combined with the offset, they won't have the offset of the $100 a month, and they're going to, our community, unfortunately, is going to get hit both ends from the power and the water side. So I think that's just something we need to be mindful of. But I'm also concerned if there's no steps being put in to have some sense of how do you effectively run government and help reduce the cost? And I don't hear anything. I mean, it's like the sky's the limit. If we get another 500 million, the government's going to go up by another 500 million because we have it this year, but we don't know whether we can sustain it. And I think that's a reality we need to acknowledge out there, that we have no ability to sustain the revenues that we're looking at here. No guarantee for that. And the fact is, and we'll get into that, Madam Chair, when we go through the individual appropriations, because I really would like to know, what are we absorbing in this budget that was funded by ARP, that were the ARPA funds that we're now expected to carry on the general fund or the overall government revenue? Because we were discussing that previously and very concerned about the fact that the administration unilaterally is making all these decisions. Must be wonderful to have all this power. I mean, we don't have a democratic government at this point because of the federal funds the governor has had control over, and she reminds us we have no say. We have no say in how that money's being spent. And now she's, what, the administration's simply expecting us, or is the OFB staff determining that we're simply going to absorb all those costs on what was subsidized by the federal government? Now the people of Guam have to continue to pay all that moving forward? I just don't see any sense of fiscal responsibility, because I'll tell you, this does not mirror the life of most people out there in this community. Not everybody's got big money thrown around here. Not everybody got the $30,000 pay raises. We have the highest paid administration in the history of the government of Guam. The most expensive operation in the history of the government of Guam. And people got to ask themselves, I'm sure they do, is my life any better? Because not everybody, there's still people out there struggling, believe it or not. I'm sure senators, you have to live on your $55,000 salary. How far does that go? Reality check. If you're not having another source of income, you're dying here. Imagine everybody else out there who's earning less than that. I don't have any further questions, Madam Chair, but I just think these are really practical issues that we need to look at, because I think this is an unprecedented growth of government that we are not planning or looking at how we're going to sustain the operations of government to ensure that we are spending the money where it's most needed and have the most positive effect on the quality of life of our people. So with that, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Brown, and very good comments. We are going to take a short recess, but when we return on the second round, which we're on the second round right now, we're going to start off with Senator Guåhan, then we'll go into the back, myself, then Senator Fisher, going down the back line, then coming up to Senator Sabina Paris, and then to the Speaker, Senator Barnett, Parkinson, Duenas, and we will end with the Minority Leader, Senator Blas. So we will be back from recess at 2 p.m. Please, everybody, be here so that we can finish this off today and move on with the budget. Okay? Other than that, create a great lunch and we'll be back. We're in recess.